This is the layout for the electronic panel for the robot. This paper is just provided by the FRC every year to help people out with wiring the robot, and this is exactly what we're going to go by for our robot. Of course, we start off with the battery. We plug one end directly into the power distribution panel, and we plug one end into the main breaker. We use the main breaker just to turn the robot on and off. Very simple, and then the other end of the main breaker goes into the PDP. From the power distribution board, we connect everything else on the robot. That's how all the power gets distributed everywhere else. On the power distribution board, we have multiple fuses. We have one here, and however many motors we have, we alternate them right here in the middle. From the power distribution board, next we plug in our RoboRio. That's basically the brain of the robot. You program this, and then you plug in your motors, and that will tell the motors what to do, all that biz. And then from the PDP, we also plug in our motor controllers. And what happens is you plug in the motor controllers, you plug the power into the power distribution board, but you plug in CAN wires into the RoboRio, and that's how they control the motor controllers, because the motors, both wires from the motor plug directly into the Talon, and that way the RoboRio can control how fast the motors go, how slow, when we want them, what direction we want them to go in. Going over the CAN wires, you have there are 4 different wires that come out of the Jaguar motor controllers. 2, they're all yellow and green wires. 2 of the wires plug into the RoboRio, and then, because we usually have 4 different Jaguars, one for each motor for the drivetrain, you solder together the green and yellow wires from one motor controller to a different motor controller, and you just chain them all together, and then once you get to your last motor, you plug it into the PCM. The PCM, like everything else, is also plugged into the power distribution board. This is just for all of our pneumatics, and the CAN wires. With the pneumatics, that's all air. We have our solenoids, our compressor, and our compressor switch. We just use that. If we were to use any pistons on the robot, we use the PCM. And then we plug in the voltage regulator module, and that just makes sure that we don't have any brownouts or any electronic problems during any competitions. From the VRM, we also plug in our camera. If we were to use one, every once in a while we use one, but over the last years we haven't. Another important thing to know is when we plug in the RoboRio, to plug it in here and here, over here, you just push it into the slot, screw it in, and that's easy. But over here, we have to make sure that we recognize that C is where the negative wire goes, and the V is the positive. That's really it for that part, but if you'd mess that up, you'd find that nothing works. From the RoboRio, we plug in everything that would require any knowing. Basically anything smart on the robot, like sensors, digital, analog sensors. Those are used to determine like how close we are to something. We can use it for those purposes, and determining like different light colors from the camera. And then finally, we have the robot signal light that doesn't require any programming at all. You just plug it in and it turns on. But last thing to go over is the gauge wire we use. I think this year we used 12 gauge wire. We have to make sure that we use the perfect size, because last year I believe we used 10 gauge wire at first when we laid everything out, and we experienced a lot of browning out problems where we'd get the robot and it would move 12 feet and then it would just turn off because nothing had enough power. So we have to make sure that we use just the right size wire to carry enough power to all components of the robot. How long? Okay. Okay. Well, this is the electrical. This is the power distribution board from the electrical panel from the robot from last year. As you can see, we've got 40 amp fuses over here for every motor that we plug in. We've got a 10 and a 20 amp fuse as well. Right over here is where we plug in the voltage regulator module and the robo reel. This is where we plug in the circuit breaker and the battery. And from here, we plug in all of our motors. And I'll give an example of how to do that. But to plug in each of the motors, you can see that there's a closed little silver wall, I guess, right there. You just gotta take a screwdriver and push it right in here. And you can see that the door opens up a little bit the more you push down. So now I'll give a demonstration on plugging everything in. I already took everything apart just to give you this little walkthrough. But we'll put it where it was before. These wires are quite simple to plug in. They're already the right size, and they already have a little bit of solder on the tip, and they've been twisted. For safety purposes, because the electronics people are so smart, we had blue is going to be our black negative wire, and red is going to be positive. These wires are very easy. You just can plug them right into where they go, and they snap into place, and they stay there.
You guys might want to start.
If you want to take it out, you can just push this here, and the wire will come straight out. This is our Robo Rio that we're plugging in right now. And this is the voltage regulator module. Last year we didn't use any pneumatics, but if we were to use any, right here in the middle is where we plug in the pneumatic control module. Alright, back to the power distribution board. I don't have a screwdriver with me. This is inadequate. We need a flathead to put in here and then pull down the door to plug these wires in. These come right from the Talon motor controllers. We twisted them and they have a little bit of solder on the end to aid with flow of electricity, but after you open the door you just plug these in and then close the door. For everything else on here, our fuses, very easy. They just take them out, plug them in, and they're all labeled as well. They say to use 10 amp or 20 amp on there. But to attach the battery, we have our main breaker right here, and we have an attachment on the end to plug directly into the battery. Very easy, labeled negative. We just put that right in there. Oops. And then we just screw it in. We do the same for the wires on the main breaker. Everything is all screwed together perfectly. But then for turning the robot on and off, it's plugged in right now, so it's got electricity going through it. But to turn it on, it's plugged in, but there's no electricity going through because it's turned off. To turn it on, all we do is flip that switch. If this were attached, we could see the robot light, the signal light turn on and blink to signal that the robot is turned on and has electricity, but that's easy, just turn it on like that and we turn it off with the red switch. That's, I forgot to talk about something before, but here on the power distribution board, we also plug in our CAN wires. Just like the wires over there, they just plug right in and they lock into place. But on the other side of the robot, we can see
it's okay.
On this side, we can see where the CAN wires come out. They're all very easy, yellow and green. Right over here is where it comes from the power distribution board, and one end goes directly to this motor controller, and then up here you can see we just attached. This is from one and this is from another. We tie them together, solder them, and we would have shrink tape on there, but we built this.
We forgot.
In a couple hours, so we just used easy electrical tape. This is where we attach, solder, tape together everything from the motors. The motors go directly to the motor controllers. Once we daisy chain all the CAN wires together, we ran it over here to the RoboRio so they can all be programmed. Easy to assemble here on the RoboRio, just like on the power distribution board. To unplug, you just push the button, and then to plug it in, nice and easy, you can just push it in like that, locks into place.
Okay, this is the RoboRio. That is basically the brain of the robot, and I'm just going to go over a few things that are plugged into it. So this is the input wire that connects to the power distribution board that gives power to the RoboRio and runs everything plugged into it. This is the robot service light that comes over here, and we soldered that. And there would usually be a light plugged in right here, but right now obviously there's not, there's just some duct tape. And this light flashes on when the robot has power. And these are the PWM wires for the Talon motor controllers that plug into the motors up here that help lift stuff on the robot. And the only reason these are Talons is because we actually ran out of Jaguar motor controllers, and the Jaguar motor controllers would usually use CAN wires instead of PWM wires like the Talons use.
Now, this is the pneumatic control module.
No way!
Just keep going. Sends electricity to all the to the pneumatics in the robot. It sends power to the pressure switch, which releases pressure and either sends forth or pulls back pressure. Now, this is pneumatic solenoids. This controls the flow of the air, whether it sucks in or it pushes outwards. Now, the wires the wires to the compressor will connect to the pneumatic solenoid here, where it's in green, right here. This is where the compressor will connect to. Same with the pressure switch. They'll all connect to the same pneumatic control module, which sends power to all pneumatics. Alright, now when it's all connected, depending on the flow that the pneumatic solenoid is going in, it will either push the air so that it pushes the piston out, or drop back in.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the voltage regulator module. The voltage regulator module is plugged into the power distribution panel to make sure we don't overload any of the different components of the robot, like the motor controllers or servos or things like that. If we had an Ethernet camera to tell where you are in relation to your surroundings from the perspective of the robot, you can also plug it into the voltage regulator module. Next, we're going to talk about